All right, welcome to the hallway track, the show for people who wish they were at the show. Joining me today for day 2 of KubeCon, we have Victor Farsick. Victor?
Yeah, that's me.
Job done. We've got Austin. Victor's coming from CodeFresh with me. We've got Austin coming from Lightstep.
Hi, I'm back again.
Back again for day 2, and joining us thankfully for day 2 was originally planned for day 1, Jessica Dean from Microsoft.
Hey, what's up?
And of course Kat Cosgrove coming to us from JFrog.
Hello.
You can find all of our Twitter handles below our names. We're going to get right into things. Feel free to throw stuff into the chat. It's always better when we're chatting about this stuff. If you're throwing in comments, we'll address them live, typically, if they're appropriate. Otherwise, we'll just have a good time. We'll talk about the day's news of KubeCon, the talks we liked, the news that we thought was interesting, and we'll talk about our perspectives on those different items. So first off, we're going to start off with the keynotes. I know yesterday the panel was a little lackluster on the keynotes, but Victor, you were saying that you actually thought the keynotes today were a lot better.
Yeah, they were, I think, less commercial and more really showing what's going on in some of the projects, and I liked it a lot. Yeah, I think they were really, I think they were better, really.
And Austin, I know you were pretty hot on the open telemetry stuff. That's kind of
That's mine. No.
Oh, is that your? Oh, I'm sorry, Victor. Go ahead.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, Victor, don't bite my style. I will point out actually the biggest. So whatever day 1 jitters the conference platform had yesterday for the keynotes had been shaken out today, and I can't recall a single they didn't drop. There was no technical issues with the keynotes, which was a big improvement over yesterday. So 2 thumbs up. Cheers to that. But yeah, I'm, as I said yesterday, I'm a maintainer of open telemetry. So I'm obviously going to mark out for open telemetry on the big stage. And I think Constance did a fantastic job of not only showing off the open telemetry collector, which is really one of the core components of the project, but also showing why it was important and how it eases sort of the migration from your existing monitoring, your existing application telemetry into this new brave open telemetry future. Because nobody really wants to go through and rip out a bunch of observability code and replace it with something new, especially if they don't have a guarantee that, hey, I'm not going to have to do this for a while. The open telemetry collector means that you can really sort of seamlessly upgrade from what you've got now to all the things that it lets you do. It gives you this, really cool vendor agnostic way to, try out the future. Maybe you've been on Zipkin or Jaeger or X-Ray or something else, some proprietary, maybe an open source or a proprietary solution. OTel collector means you can take that, convert it to something else, and try something new, right? And I think she really got that message through, and that was really exciting to me.
And Victor, you were hot on it as well.
Yeah, I really thought it was really good. I mean, well presented subject I'm really interested in, not as much as it's not my main kind of subject like Austin's, but and moving towards some sort of standard is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And before I share my favorite part of the keynote, Kat, Jessica, what were your favorite moments of the keynotes?
So I really enjoyed the more power, less pain keynote because like
the Data Studio one.
Yeah, because the first thing they ask is like, does it have to be this hard? And that's something that I like complain about in the CNCF space a lot. Everybody says Kubernetes is hard, right? And it is, sure, but it doesn't actually have to be this difficult anymore. So these kinds of like proof of concept, real world stories of like how I built a thing with the actual struggles you go through and the solutions and like why things don't necessarily need to be this difficult. We're kind of forcing it to be difficult. I love those stories so much. Even if I don't actually understand the super technical content aspects of it sometimes because it's a space I'm just like not familiar with. The actual real world story of somebody like doing something hard and making it easier to do for other people is like, that's really appealing for me. So I was a big fan.
I second that entirely. That's one of my biggest passions. And especially in the space, I feel like that's even when I tend to give talks, that's what I tend to focus on is, does it have to be this hard? What's an easier way we can do this? There's so many different tools and products, but what's the end goal? And when you hear it from, again, like war stories or other people's experiences, it really kind of, I don't know, it helps put things in perspective. It's just, it's always fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Waleed, for joining. By the way, Dan Pop will be joining us tomorrow. Hopefully you'll be willing to hang out with us anyway. What were you going to say, Victor?
No, it's also whether something is hard is relative, because when people say Kubernetes is hard, they're not really contemplating how hard would it be to do the same thing without Kubernetes. So it's hard compared to you deploying a binary.
It was really hard before Kubernetes too.
This is way harder than throwing a bunch of stuff over the wall for 400 IT people to deal with. Yeah.
As somebody who comes from an IT background, please don't throw a bunch of stuff over that wall.
Well, I do want to actually bridge off that point, because what DevOps really has meant is that it's now hard for you as a developer. And before, all that hard stuff was abstracted away and it was someone else's problem. It was someone who was in a different office or a different part of the building, and you didn't have to care. And so DevOps is making you care, right?
You know the like the children's game, light as a feather, stiff as a board?
Yes.
It's like that. It's really hard to lift up like one person by yourself, right? But if you get like 8 people doing it, you can do it with like very little effort and your fingertips. Like everybody has to do some work, but like ultimately the work is easier for each person if everybody just does a little bit of it.
Yeah, I agree more with Victor on this, and I think I diverge with you, Austin. I think that like if we were asked to deploy software as engineers 10 years ago 5 times a day, that feels very different than it does now.
And make it scale automatically and have all the other stuff connected to storage and all the other stuff that we are taking for granted.
Delivering software felt easy when I literally emailed a zip file to the operations person to unzip onto the server. But then when it crashed, it sure didn't feel easy when I had to debug why there was configuration drift between the two things.
Hey, I worked in a more advanced company at that time. We were pushing zips to Git.
But this is my point, right? Like we actually haven't I would say we haven't actually had a net reduction in pain. What we have had is a more equitable distribution of pain. Because
that's what I think is happening.
Yeah, like all we've in a lot of ways, and I think we talked a bit about this yesterday with sort of the proliferation of projects coming into the CNCF that aren't explicitly, more Kubernetes components or more cloud native. It's not just another storage driver or software-defined networking thing. It's service catalogs. It's deployment as code. It's GitOps, things like that. We're moving into this new phase where it's like, okay, we recognize that it is actually painful to run systems and to understand systems. How do we make that less painful? How do we actually work on addressing these human factors?
I think the humanity part is a big deal, because even 10 years ago, it wasn't just the developers throwing things over the wall and then the ops saying, hey, there's a bug in your zip file or anything like that. It was also the incentive, right? Like developers might have been totally fine trying to push changes 5-10 times a day because they're not the ones deploying it. But the operations people who have to keep the lights on are like, absolutely not. Absolutely. Like the incentive was different, right? And now by having DevOps and having maybe an end goal that both sides can unite in, that also kind of shifts the incentive from being against each other to working with each other. Like that's that human factor too.
Well, as we always say, DevOps is dead. Long live DevOps. That's actually a good transition point into another part, empathy related from the keynotes. There was a lot of discussion around diversity, inclusion, and there's even the formation now of a inclusive language committee. And curious if what everybody's thoughts are on that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with hell yeah as well.
Yeah.
I use y'all a lot. First of all, because I'm Southern and I just refuse to let go of it, even though I don't really have much of an accent otherwise, but also because it is inclusive. You know, it doesn't make anyone feel alienated except for people who like maybe really, really hate Southerners, in which case, like, you don't want to talk to me anyway. But it seems like it's such a small amount of effort to make sure that you're not making anybody uncomfortable. Like, really, it is extremely low effort to just change your language to something gender neutral so that you don't make somebody feel alienated, you know? So I think it's fantastic.
When a bunch of people are telling you that something hurts, like,
you should stop.
You should stop doing that thing, right? Like, I honestly, you know, it is so easy in the world. The easiest thing in the world is to be kind.
Oh yeah, it takes active effort to be mean, and I am lazy, which is, you know, why I'm a developer.
And I really hope. I'm very proud of the CNCF for the way that they have stood up for individual projects, for the Kubernetes project specifically, and around the sort of cloud native world, right? Like, Go had a bit of a kerfluffle, let's say, when they put up their statement of support for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a white dude from Kentucky. Say what you want about my credentials to talk about any of this stuff, but it is so easy to be kind. Mm-hmm. And it is so hard to be not. It takes effort to be a jerk. And let's just stop being jerks.
Well, I agree. And I actually thought there'd be more controversy. I thought that more people were going to be anti-inclusion, but it turns out everybody's in favor of more inclusivity. So
we're real weird.
You got the weirdo bunch, but I think the CNCF has also done a really, really good job of making it abundantly clear that any type of behavior that alienates any member of the community will not be tolerated. Like, it's like we're violently intolerant of intolerance, which is what is required for a tolerant society, actually. But the CNCF has made a point and done a really good job of not tolerating people like that in the community. So
I am a little bit curious to see if in that working group around inclusive language, if they include people that wouldn't traditionally be involved in inclusivity discussions, because it'd be interesting to see if there's some people that are let's say that more traditional, less open to changing language. It'd be interesting to see if some of those people are included, to see if maybe they balance each other out a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of balance, I suppose.
I'm going to so one thing that I actually think that there's been a very big, like, anti-jargon sort of movement.
That's me.
Yeah, and I respect, like, that. Yes, there's a lot of things we use jargon for that we shouldn't, but I actually think that, you know, jargon and these concepts that these small words, or these words that encompass a lot of other things, are actually incredibly useful, right? For practitioners, there is a culture here, right? There is a language of development. There is a way that we can do this in a way that is not. There's a way that we can do this that is welcoming to people, that is, you know, inclusive of people with different experiences, different backgrounds. There are obviously some very easy things, and then there are some very hard things. And I think overall, you want to move towards a position where it's, like, easier to get in, and it's easier to understand things. But at the same time, like, there's a reason that doctors talk the way they talk, and it's not just to exclude people. It's because sometimes you want a specific term for a specific thing. And there's a reason why programmers and ops people talk the way they talk, and it's because sometimes there are specific reasons to call something a specific way, right? Now, we can do better. We can always do better. We can learn and adapt and grow. And that is my real point. Like, on one hand, you shouldn't just be dogmatically opposed to jargon because it's jargon. You should be willing to say, like, look, things are changing, things are going to be different. Let's pick and choose what is useful, and then cast away what is not.
Yeah, we are going to move more into some of the other items of news. I would just say that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, the CNCF wants you, and you're welcome and invited to the community. So please join. So we are going to move into some of the other news. So that covers the keynotes. And overall, I have to agree with the sentiment that David Sudio's talk was my favorite, because I do love the war stories. I love the on the ground kind of experience. Oh, we ran into this thing and it hurt, and so we fixed it. And that was a lot of fun. Going into some of our favorite talks, I actually want to start with that before we get into the other news items. So, Kat, can I go to you first for your favorite talk of the day?
You absolutely can. Yesterday. Well, of yesterday, this was just a specific part of a talk. It was in the 101 track, one of the first talks of the day, and like the very end of the talk. This had not a lot to do with the rest of her talk, but the speaker was suggesting a concept that she called sheet ops. I've never heard of this before, but it is ridiculous and I love it. Okay. So we all, at least I, and most of my coworkers and lots of people I know, we hate YAML. Okay. YAML is not good. It's not a good format. I'm tired of it. It's easy to mess up. She suggested using Google Sheets instead of YAML, and she called it sheet ops. And I don't like spreadsheets either, but I do like spreadsheets better than YAML. And I think it says something that like enough people are so mad at YAML as a format that some subset of us has decided that a spreadsheet is a less painful alternative. And I'm not opposed to it. Honestly, I'm really not. I'm going to try it. I think it's ridiculous, but I'm going to try it. And like, why not? Why not?
I feel like I'm the crazy one because YAML gets such a bad rap, but I actually enjoy YAML. Like maybe I'm a masochist, but
somebody has to, right? Like somebody.
I'm not one person.
Compared to the alternatives,
it could be. Yeah,
it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. It could be XML. I don't mind JSON.
Okay.
I mean, I did XML.
Now we go fight.
Back in the day, I actually worked on Windows systems a lot, and I would play with unattended XML files. That was a nightmare. I've done Jenkins with Groovy pipelines before. Like, to me, YAML at least is, and I know people would want to, I don't know, punch me for this, but I feel like YAML's organized. Like, I know to have spaces, I know that there's issues, but at least it makes my brain happy.
It is organized. It is organized. It is easy to read. Reading YAML is not my complaint ever. I like reading YAML. It is very easy to read at a glance. So if I have to look at somebody else's Helm charts, I immediately know what's going on, right?
Yes.
The issue is writing it.
Okay, but as a former Microsoft shop person, so I used to work in a Microsoft shop, and I did a lot of XML because a lot of SOAP. XML is really good for machine readable stuff that a human can also then go on and read later to figure out what's going on. YAML is a much better like human readable first format, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. But Wesley says that YAML killed his parents, and
damn, Wes, sorry.
Well, that's just a bias right there.
I'm sorry about that, dog.
What were you going to say, Victor?
I don't think the problem is in YAML. I mean, I'm in a group of people who likes YAML. What I don't like is when people use YAML to describe imperative stuff. Like, when you have conditionals, when you have loops, when you have things that are better described with a programming language, any, in YAML. That's the problem I see. But to describe a state, literally kind of state, without any logic, without any conditionals or this or that, it's fine. It's just that we're abusing it like almost anything else. That's the issue.
Yeah, I'm just remembering writing Ansible now, and I'm sad.
Exactly.
So I I hear sheet ops and I think more like piece of sheet ops. I don't want that.
I need to mention this. Dixie mentioned sheet ops before we started the live stream, and English is not my native language. I understood
it sounds like that,
as shit ops.
It sounds like shit ops.
I was like, I need to hear what's it about.
I am teasing, by the way. I think it's sort of hilarious that somebody is doing this. And if they're using it to generate YAMLs that get checked into Git and go through a process, then who am I to tell you that you're making YAML wrong? You're still making YAML at the end of the day. I think it's great. I joke, but I think
it's doing. It's just like it's something else is generating YAML based on the values in the spreadsheet. And I have written like a really ugly Python script before using like Jinja templating to generate YAML for me because I don't like just writing YAML.
Yeah, what I'm hearing really, if I put on my product hat, is people just want a better IDE for working with YAML.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty much like if you can just solve like simple indenting that never gets messed up, like you're pretty much there.
And there are not to plug VS Code, but there are a lot of extensions that help. Maybe that's why I enjoy it.
Yeah, I have an extension for it for Sublime, and it like that helps me with like formatting issues, that things like, you know, screwing up tabs or not knowing when a thing needs a dash or not. But yeah, like part of the problem is not knowing what the schema is. Like what
as a happy VS Code user, I will agree.
Tabs are not the problem. Nobody should ever use them, and that's it.
I use
your team spaces.
So you heard it here first, Wesley. The problem was not YAML. It was actually Sublime Text or VI that was standing behind YAML that killed your parents. That's the real problem.
Okay. Really, YAML was trying to make you Batman.
If you're using VI to write your YAML, then that might be part of the problem.
That just means you're a badass. Let's go on to your favorite talk. We have more talks to cover. So Jessica, what was your favorite talk of the day?
Mine was actually from yesterday, and I thought I really liked it because it was very unique. But it was Justin Garrison's talk. He used to work at Disney in animation, and he hand drew every single animation for his slide. It took him like hours, probably days. But
it was amazing.
It was amazing. And what was even cooler was the reception of it, even on Twitter afterwards. I guess there was a guy who was watching the talk or was explaining the talk to his son, and his son's like 7 or 8 years old. And the son sounded so interested where he wanted to watch the talk. And you see him sitting down in front of the computer watching this KubeCon talk about Kubernetes and engineering and all this stuff. And the kid's like 7 years old, and he was completely enthralled because storytelling as a means of presentation is super effective.
I will say, if you want a little bit more behind the scenes on that talk, if you go look on the CNCF Twitch channel, I was actually on the pre-show this morning before the keynotes talking to him about his talk. And he kind of talked about, like, I guess his wife did some of the singing for part of it, and he had his whole family involved in actually producing that talk. It was really cool.
Yeah, and one of the commenters actually just said that it took him 2 months. Yeah, so I didn't realize.
How very cool! If somebody has the link to that talk, throw it into the chat. That's a killer one. Very cool.
Easily talk of the conference. Like we topped it on day one, and everything's downhill from here.
Austin, your favorite talk? Same one or a different one?
No, I'm gonna say the second greatest talk from the conference. So having cloud native fun with Honk CTL, which was delivered today by Jeffrey Sika. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name. From Red Hat.
It was a great talk.
I cannot. There is nothing I can say that will do this talk justice. So,
what is Honk CTL? Honk Control?
Yes. This is a talk that you have to see, and you will very quickly learn about a lot of Kubernetes community memes that maybe you weren't aware of, and you will get a crash course into Untitled Goose Game and Among Us, and you will learn why Burgundy is sus. It's
I figured it was some kind of honk ops where you can build YAML using car honks from your car.
This is like unfettered online Kubernetes Twitter memery.
Yeah.
And it's
I will say, okay,
unhinged, but
I do want to I want to point out something that I think is actually like really important from this though, and it's the importance of play when it comes to learning. And there's like this is really important to me personally as someone that works on like documentation and works on like education stuff a lot for, cloud native tech. And God, you got to make it fun. Like it's so hard. It is the hardest thing in the world, and I really liked this as a way to sort of keep that spirit alive of like, oh yeah, I know it's important to make learning and play kind of overlap, because unless you do that, because people will learn better if they're engaged, right? And if they're entertained, just having tutorials, just having a blog post isn't enough. And I think stuff like this is like, I love doing stuff like this because I think this format, just like, hey, you're going on camera, you're talking to people, and I can see the chat. Yeah, the talk. Yeah, well, he points out the talk is just love and community, right?
Yeah. It sounds like melted starburst being poured directly into my eyes, which I'm very in favor of. I'm looking forward to checking it out.
But a lot of this does get back to the very real point of like, hey, you want to learn things, right? You want to like grow and you want to develop, and you can do that with like play. You can do that with fun, and you can do that in a way that isn't just like, I'm sitting here typing console commands, doing my CK, my certified Kubernetes administrator exam.
Yeah,
agreed.
In general, are a great way to learn and teach. If you're the kind of person who likes puzzles, a CTF is always a great way to learn.
Yeah.
Victor, what was your favorite talk?
Couple. I like more those hands-on type of talks, like progressive delivery. What they're doing with Flagger, I think it's amazing. And not actually, I like the tool. I don't know how many of you use it, but not that much because it does progressive delivery, but because that it brings great level of simplification to Kubernetes. If you want to do things right, you need to create a deployment, a service. If you're using Istio, a virtual service and a gateway, and and it goes down similar route like Knative. Like, hey, we can actually reduce things to 20 lines of YAML that contain the information that really, really matter. And I liked it a lot. I think it's awesome that there are projects that simplify, that remove the clutter. There is a lot of clutter in Kubernetes definitions, kind of things that really do not bring any value, just repetition.
Yeah, good call. Well, and it looks like Waleed is saying that he agrees with you, Austin, that there was, I didn't attend this, but there was, I think it was a Capture the Flag game organized by SIG Security. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw people tweeting about it, and it looked like people were having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was busy all of day zero with Hotel Community Day, but I've heard some good things about that. And also, while I get the chance, I'm going to shout out the talk that you're going to want to see tomorrow in the keynote, which is the hacking and hardening in the cloud native garden with this Sig Honk, I think is. But it's Ian Coldwater, Duffy Cooley, Brad Gesseman, and Roy McCoon.
It's stacked.
It's absolutely stacked. You're going to want to tune back in tomorrow. Same channel, because we're gonna have a very special surprise related to that keynote.
Anything Duffy Cooley's doing is gonna be gold. So definitely worth checking out.
But come back tomorrow, all y'all.
Come back tomorrow. You're gonna want to come back tomorrow.
You're gonna want to come back
for a special surprise.
Looking forward to it. So coming out of the talks, everybody's shared some of their favorite talks. I'm looking at some of the community kind of buzz going around. And I got to say, my favorite person is AWS Geek. If Taryn, you don't mind throwing that up. This is one of the evangelists from Amazon, and he actually goes through and draws these really cool illustration and notes for all the talks and keynotes that they attend, or he attends. And it's not just because he did this amazing illustration of my talk that it just made me so happy. I actually threw it into the repo, and I've been tweeting it all day. And I ran in and showed it to my wife in the middle of the day, and she was like, "That's nice, whatever the heck that is." But I really love what Jerry's doing with these illustrations. Follow him on Twitter at AWS Geek. And
God, I hate people who can draw like that.
Oh,
it's
I'm
so
jealous.
It's so fair.
It is completely unfair. All I have is the stellar wit. And these people.
I'm just like hot and vaguely funny, and like
we all make do with what we've got.
Yeah.
All I
it's
have are
true.
these trenchant insights and delightful bon mots. But shout out to Jerry Hargrove.
That's like the most organized visual drawing I think I've ever seen, too.
It's incredible. I can't
It
even.
really
like,
is.
write
I love
in
the
a straight
mask.
line.
Can you go back?
Oh yeah, the mask one.
I
Yeah.
bought an iPad and an Apple Pencil because I wanted to learn how to do visual note taking, and then it looked like a 5-year-old had just colored
Yeah.
on.
Like I love
Glass.
the little detail of the surgical mask hanging off of the
I was really laughing because I actually do have a drawn illustration in my talk showing the architecture that I made on my iPad, and I next time I give this talk, I'm actually going to go and replace it with the one that he did because it's substantially better.
It's really good, actually. Yeah, I shouldn't say actually, but yes, this is very good. I liked it. Like I said, I liked your talk yesterday.
So going into some of that's just kind of an opening for the community discussion. Discussion in day one, we noticed that the Slack channels were working really well. There was a lot of conversation going on in there. I think that continued in day two. I noticed that I was getting blown up in a couple of channels and people were tagging stuff, and I was getting pulled into these different discussions on community, there's like a water cooler one. There's just a bunch of stuff going on. Mix and mingle. Have you all had success in the Slack channels as well?
Yeah, the Slack's been really, really, really active. I was moderating yesterday a couple of sessions, so I've had to, babysit the track channels, and it's been very active, and people have been very engaged. Also, the chat that's built into the platform, several people have messaged me through that, which didn't happen at EU, but more than one person has messaged me through just the in-browser thing built into Intrado, which is pretty cool. People do seem overall more engaged with each other than they were at EU.
Yeah, this morning when I was doing the Twitch stream, the pre-show, I guess, keynote pre-show, someone tweeted a picture where they had a bunch of people in the Rambly chat, which lets you put a Twitch stream up. So there's a bunch of people standing, little avatars standing around watching the Twitch stream. It was extremely adorable.
That's very cute. That's precious. Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, so I agree completely. We'll move into some of the other news, kind of less talk related, less content related, just more the news coming out around KubeCon. This is always the buzz section. The News Stack ran this excellent piece, Taryn, if you don't mind throwing it up, about Apple, how they're planning to run most of their compute on Kubernetes. This is really about probably yesterday's keynote, but there was some additional kind of discussion going on around that. I'm not going to lie. I actually logged in this morning bleary-eyed, and I thought this was a Nicole Kidman story movie or something, because that's I think she looks a little bit like Nicole Kidman. But this was actually pretty cool news to hear that Apple is kind of all in on Kubernetes. Do you think this is going to trigger other people to follow suit? Oh, this is Gremlin. Wait, how am I getting Gremlin? Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry.
It's okay.
I got it.
But
now you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so people love to do whatever the FANG companies are doing. So, I mean, it's cool, but for me, I think any FANG company could have said something vaguely like this, and everybody.
What are you calling them? Fan companies? FANG? What?
Facebook,
FANG,
Apple,
FAANG.
Yeah, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Any one of those companies, IMO, they're huge trendsetters for tech with huge salaries, and any of them could have done something like this, and startup land would have been yep, gonna need that. So I don't know.
Netflix is the holdout.
Yeah, Netflix is the holdout. When Netflix does something, everybody's absolutely immediately. But I don't know. Yeah, I think people will probably jump on board, but I think there's also 5 other companies that could have done this and had people jump on board. So
I think Apple's in a unique position. They've always had the issue of cloud conflict where they were running everything on AWS for a while, and that felt pretty weird, given that AWS is actually, or Amazon's a big competitor with Apple in many spaces. And so they started putting stuff, they looked around and they weren't going to put it on Azure because that was definitely too wrong. And so they put a bunch of stuff on Google, which turns out is their other biggest competitor. So I think they looked around and they said, you know what, we just really need our own cloud. And
they didn't shop around at Oracle?
I don't know if maybe they're going to take it all to Alibaba Cloud in the end.
Just one of everything.
Yeah, I mean, to put on my Corey Quinn hat for a second, which is something that I shouldn't do.
First?
I will never make that face.
Okay, that's fair.
Gosh, it's such a different world, right? Like it's very silly in a lot of ways how much we how much we copy these sort of extremely large trillion-dollar industries, because it's really not useful for 90% of the audience. A company like Apple can do things that even a company like, take some like JP Morgan Chase, right? JPMC or Comcast, right? Like the decisions they make are different than you, and the way they make those decisions is different than you. And it's not really great to just look at what someone is doing and say, like, we're going to do that. Apple could make anything they wanted work, in the same way that Netflix has been making, EC2 templates work for 10 plus years now, right?
Yeah.
It's
not the same.
What it is. It's not the same.
Yeah.
These aren't comparable.
I don't know if they can make anything work. Tell that to Tidal.
But that's a business model thing, right? Like, that's not a technology thing.
No, you're right. You're right. Apple is definitely unique. And I do remember a few years ago at KubeCon when surveyed. This is my first KubeCon. Almost everybody in the audience was planning to go home and build bare metal clusters and just do that Kubernetes the hard way, Kelsey Hightower. And I remember thinking, like, that seems inaccessible. And of course, you got a year down the road, and all of those people abandoned those projects and just moved to a cloud provider or OpenShift.
Everyone's using Azure, or everyone's using Amazon.
Yeah. I get it. I understand why people want to emulate what companies like Apple are doing with their technology, but you are not the same as them. So doing the same thing they're doing is not going to bring you the same success they're having. You're not going to see the same benefits.
People tend to look at like the labels or the details rather than looking at the principles and practices. Like, if you take a look at why Apple might be doing that and the practices they're implementing for what that's helping them to achieve, maybe adopt more of a philosophical approach for your company and what practices you can, like, people get so hung up, I think, on the details and buzzwords and what's hot. Like, I mean, Dan, your example of that Kelsey Hightower talk was a prime example. Like, everyone thinks, oh, I'm going to go out and do this, and then realize, wait, that's not, like, it would have been better to think of, why do you want to do this? What are you going to benefit from it? And what can you put in place that will still allow you to achieve success, but maybe isn't as challenging or
extreme niche.
Well, I think I was going to say even expensive, not just from a cost perspective, but time management perspective. Like, why try to, I don't know, build the Burj Khalifa when you're a startup? Like, when you still need to, like, I don't know, get an AMC movie theater off the ground. Like, why go to the extreme? And I don't know why I thought of those two buildings, but that's just what popped in my head.
But that's still better than the alternative that is happening in large enterprises that live somewhere around 1999 and that are still kind of, no, we're going to figure out our own way, right? We know that we are 20 years behind everybody. We're a big bank and we're still going to figure out our own scheduler. We know better, right? So I'm still happier if people follow what Netflix is doing than trying to replicate or invent their own stuff when they're clearly not capable for doing that.
Yeah, totally.
But you're also talking about, you're splitting hairs almost at a certain point, right? Like, I don't necessarily think that a sufficiently large financial institution could create their own scheduler better than what the community can come up with. But that's also not really what's happening. What we're really talking about are, if you are a sufficiently established industry, there are thousands and tens of thousands of applications, services, and components that will never make financial sense for you to replace. So there is no way the unit economics of rewriting account management will ever possibly work out in favor of like burn it down and start over. So everything becomes a story of adaptation and adding proxies and adding things in front of it and adding compatibility layers and so on and so forth. You know, like sunk cost fallacy is a very real thing, but in technology, it's very rarely a fallacy, and it's more just like, yeah, you can't do better than what you have because what you have is so foundational to what you do that there's not a better option. You can only ever patch. You can only ever work around the limitations.
So let's leave Apple and Dre behind and get into some more concrete technology stuff. There was another project that came out, which is Gremlin, which claims to soundproof chaotic pods in Kubernetes clusters. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to try this out. It's coming from the chaos engineering platform. Pretty interesting technology that seems to essentially look for times when you have service degradation because of the way that pods are organized in nodes, and then trying to move those pods to other nodes more aggressively. Does this solve a problem for any of you, or is this really just a Band-Aid for people who aren't using their resource requests correctly?
Shout out to my boy Jason Yee over at Gremlin.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I'm gonna go with it's rad, but I will acknowledge that a lot of that is because there are two people I very much like quite a lot working at Gremlin, and I want them to succeed, and I want their stuff to succeed.
So now that I've done my prerequisite shout outs, Gremlin's an interesting company because most people don't. I feel like if you're in the place where you're mature enough to need someone else to come in and break all your stuff, man, you are way ahead of the curve. Right?
Yeah.
I think that what they're getting at, though, is like a very cool application of C groups and a really cool application of some of the underlying technology underpinning this, where it's less interesting to me that you're doing this. Like, it's less interesting to me that you're doing this in the sense of like, okay, I can have this controlled environment where I do this, and more that I'm moving prod and staging closer and closer and closer together, right? And at some point, you shouldn't have prod and staging. The only thing that looks like prod is prod, right? And the more that you can build a system that is truly resilient in prod all the time, and you're always going to prod, and you're using feature flagging, you're using chaos, and you're using observability, and you're using all these things to make sure that everything you're building is reliable. Good stuff.
I'm a fan of testing in prod. I love the idea of not having staging anymore. I test in prod. I am also not allowed to write production code, but I test in my own prod fearlessly, even when other people are using it. And it's been fine so far.
That's great. What do you think, Jessica? Chaos engineering for the win?
I'm one of those people where I usually withhold judgment until I've actually had hands-on time with a new product. It looks interesting. It sounds rad. I know Jason. Haven't seen him in a few years, but it intrigues me.
Well, so actually, Jessica, let me ask you then this. We'll try this as an experiment for the hallway track. One of my favorite parts of the hallway track of any conference is getting to hear about new tools that I haven't heard about before, and we're trying to cover some of those. Do you maybe have a favorite new tool you've discovered recently that you could share?
I do. It's semi-Azure specific at the moment, which usually goes against me having favorites because I don't like having favorites that only one play group gets to play with. So there's a feature, or there's an extension actually built into that you can add into Visual Studio Code called Bridge to Kubernetes. It used to be called Local Process for Kubernetes, and before that it was called Dev Spaces. But it's a way to give your developers isolated test access to your Kubernetes cluster. And you can actually use header propagation to have a subdomain, which as a single developer, I can debug one API with the full context of my application. So even if I'm like, I don't know, if I'm debugging one particular part of my application that the only way I can see there's a problem is going through my web front end and having the full experience of everything working together. It makes it really hard as a developer to try to debug that from a local perspective or even a remote perspective, right? Like I would need to deploy that to some remote cluster. Bridge to Kubernetes solves that by giving me a hybrid interface. So I can actually have the code running natively on my system without Helm charts, without Docker. Like I truly get to still be a developer and not have to worry about some of that more operational crap. I get to have that running natively on my system. And then the Bridge to Kubernetes extension takes care of routing and everything on the backend without me knowing about it. And as a result, when I start my debugger locally, I can actually debug that single service with the full application in use, and I can do so in an isolated sandbox. And what's cool is then once I have, that helps me have confidence in whatever I'm debugging now, whatever I fix. Once I have that confidence, I can check that in and commit it. And I can also use a CI/CD platform of my choice, CodeFresh, Jenkins, GitHub Actions, whatever you want. And you can still be able to take advantage of, essentially when you run Bridge to Kubernetes for the first time, it deploys a pod in your cluster called a routing manager, which uses Envoy on the back end. And you can still take advantage of that to add routing labels, just using kube control, route label, whatever. And then you can have, it's different ways that you want to do this depending on your CI platform. But your last step of your pipeline can actually grab the URL of the isolated sandbox that was created as part of your pipeline and add that to your pull request. So now other people on your team can go and visually see in an isolated environment all the changes that you just made to your pull request.
That's super cool. What's it called again?
It's called Bridge to Kubernetes. And
Bridge to Kubernetes.
Bridge to Kubernetes. Right now, at this time, it only supports Azure clusters, but it is on the roadmap to support other Kubernetes clusters, which I think will be kind of a game changer for developers.
Wow, interesting. Very cool. Well, we are getting closer to the top of the hour. So I want to have one more discussion before we close. And that is around, and it's a little bit self-serving, but some of the news around GitOps. There was a couple of things that came out today that were really interesting that, frankly, I was involved with some of them. But there was a blog post that came out around the pains of GitOps 1.0. And there was the announcement, which I don't know if it's even percolated yet because it happened a little bit later in the day, but the announcement of a GitOps working group under the auspices of the CNCF, which is something that CodeFresh, Azure, GitHub, Weaveworks, and AWS are all signed on to. So I'm curious, what are the feelings in the group around GitOps, the formation of a working group? What do you think about it?
So last year I was asked about GitOps on this very same panel, and I said that I wasn't sure how I felt about it at the time because there is a lot in DevOps of cramming ops onto something else, and it feels buzzwordy to me, and I didn't, my knee-jerk reaction when something does that is to just assume that it's buzzwordy until proven otherwise. And so it's been 6 months ish since I declared myself undecided on GitOps, and I've decided now that I think I'm here for it. I think I am now pro GitOps. It's becoming more clear that it's not just a buzzword thing, and I think I'm down, especially for the working group, because it does need a little bit of fleshing out, but I think I'm here for it. Good job. Congratulations, y'all.
Cat's down to clown with GitOps. What do you think, Victor?
It's badly needed, I think, mostly because the only way for GitOps really to work is if actually wide variety of tools adopt it, right? Because as long as I can have, if any of the tools in my tool chain can break it, right? So it really needs a wide adoption for it's special in that sense that it needs wide adoption for that to work. Just like we needed a wide adoption of CLIs and APIs for CI/CDs to work, right? Otherwise, how do we communicate with it? Same thing with GitOps. As long as Kubernetes processes are just doing things that are completely independent of my Git repository, Git will not work. And that's a big issue, right? And I'm not even sure yet whether that's a thing. But, as soon as my Kubernetes cluster decides for a good reason to roll back something, GitOps is out of the window, right?
Jessica, where's your head at?
I feel like I've been a fan of GitOps since day one, and I never had to be convinced. I feel like I already follow practices of that, so I'm kind of excited to see other people coming around, like Kat, joining the GitOps crew.
Are we starting a cult? I'm down.
We're starting a team, a working group.
It's a working group. It's like a cult. It's cheaper though. Austin, what do you think?
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we called GitOps infrastructure as code, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what an old.
Yeah, I know. They're going to put me in the ground one of these days. I'm about to get.
What are you, from the 2017s?
I'm about to get Running Man out of this stream.
Ancient. No, you just
Well,
you
so,
feel
but
like
I
it's
do
really
wanna-
an iteration on an old idea is what you're saying.
I mean, sure, but so are containers, so is Kubernetes in a lot of ways, right? Like that's not. I don't feel like that's an interesting like the common like, oh, you're just doing something that someone wrote about in the 70s isn't a super interesting way to think about things. One thing I think that GitOps suffers from, and maybe not suffers from, but it's a trend that I am noticing that I don't like, is that because GitOps, it's very easy to take this GitOps first approach to building features in developer tooling, right? And this makes a lot of sense because if I'm a product person, or I'm an engineer, and I'm thinking like, okay, I want to add support for whatever feature in my dev tool, and we already use Terraform, or we've decided that Terraform is the way that we are going to handle DSC for infrastructure, then I should infrastructure and related things, right? Then I should build this into Terraform first. I should have a way to do this all through APIs, and that's cool, but that's not how most people start out interacting with the product. That's not how most like for all the Sturm und Drang around like portals, right? And about the persistence.
What was that word, Austin?
Portals.
No, for
Sturm
that.
und Drang.
German. Sturm.
Is it one word? Is it two words?
No, it's three words. Sturm, STURM, und UND DRANG. It's German. Google it.
Okay.
For all of the noise made around developer portals, around like the AWS console, around the Azure console, around the GCP console, around Kubernetes management UIs, like a visual control plane is actually really useful for people because we, as a species, learn visually. We are visual creatures. We see things and we interpret them through our eyeballs, and that goes into our brain and maps concepts, right? So
I have a brain.
But I'm assuming a lot of things, but I worry that this focus on GitOps, right? Like, and I think what is needed is a mapping between these visual concepts that we can see in a browser and what that actually means in a version-controlled, Git-driven world, right? Like, I want these to be like this. I don't want it to be, I have one experience here and one experience here. I want it to be married.
Well, presumably that's the point of the work.
That's my main beef. I think, I've been very vocal against UIs and dashboards and what's not because I don't think that people should use them, but because I'm against people doing random things without anybody else in the company, in the team knowing about those things, right? So I'm fine with you going to a UI, click 3 buttons and something happens, as long as that is reflected somewhere.
Yeah, I think Victor had a really good blog post a little while ago. I think it was called "Ninjas Use UIs." They make a change and they leave without a trace, which is definitely worth checking out.
But this is the point, though, right? Like, yeah. The problem isn't the existence of the UI, and the problem isn't even the existence of the UI in like a view-only mode, right? I think a lot of people could say, like, oh, I should have a UI that is just a representation of the current state, and maybe one that shows the desired state and perhaps shows the diff between them. But the real, like, I think we will get to the point where this is a realized dream when doing anything in the UI is simply making pull request, like I have a UI, I do some actions in the UI, and that creates a PR against the underlying repository that has state in it, right? Like we have to, too often these are experiences designed by different teams, different groups of people at the same company even, and ne'er shall the twain meet. So that is not a great way to go forward. That is the traditional like AWS console versus cloud formation, sort of dichotomy.
I should probably draw a little bit of a distinction. There's the GitOps working group, which I'm involved in, and the goal is really to develop standards around GitOps and promote its use and try to kind of nail down some of the things that have been confusing in that as a movement that's been happening for the last 2 years. And then there's also this discussion that's going around GitOps 2.0 that's focused around questions like, how do you do this at scale? Like, if I have 10,000 clusters I need to manage, does that mean I need 10,000 Git repos? Is there some sort of meta description of a rollout process that will work through Git? Some of those kinds of questions that will make it scale and go wide. I think that's what we really want to try to solve. But I'm encouraged actually with how much action there's happening in the community and how quickly it's moving. Again, I am biased since I am on like the founding part of the GitOps working group, but I'm super excited about it for my part. We are at the top of the hour. And of course, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. We will be doing this again tomorrow. Remember, this is the hallway track, the show for people who wish they were at the show, which I think certainly describes us. So please join us for that. Again, thank you, Kat. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Victor. As always, enlightening conversation and expert opinions. Really appreciated. Tomorrow we'll be closing out KubeCon, so we'll be doing the final day of the conference. Would encourage everybody to check out the Twitch stream that CNCF has going on after the keynote. I'll be joining that discussion as well and covering it there, so we'll cover it twice. But again, appreciate everybody tuning in. Please, like and subscribe or whatever, and share this with your friends. Post it out there. All the links will be going up on social media. So if you saw something that you thought was interesting and want to double click on, hit us up on Twitter at Today Was Awesome for myself or at CodeFresh. Of course, you saw everybody else's Twitter handles. And we'll try to double click on those things tomorrow or keep the conversation going. So thank you again and have a good night.